Hi everybody, this is Chris from the Cloverdale Transit Authority, and as of the posting of this video, today is National Train Day. And we want to thank the folks from the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad for inviting us to come down and film our video here in their yard and maintenance shop. And if you are ever here in Northeast Ohio, put this railroad on your things to do because it's fantastic. First off, you're going through the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, so everything is beautiful there. And then these railroad cars, or vintage railroad cars, are fantastic. And the locomotives, especially the two that are used to pull the train, are late 1950s Alco FPAs, which is my favorite diesel locomotive. So I'm going to put a link to the website in the description, so check it out. And National Train Day, we kind of celebrate for two different reasons. One, of course, is kind of marks the time when the eastern half of the Transcontinental Railroad was connected to the western half at a place called Promontory Point in Utah in 1869. And when I was in school, we studied about driving the Golden Spike and joining those two halves of the railroad. And ever since that happened, that created mass transit in the United States. And you could travel from the eastern half to the western half and back again, and freight could move. And from there, the railroads just grew like crazy. And another reason why we celebrate National Train Day is to kind of bring awareness to all of the great things that the railroads have brought us as a country and continue to bring us as a country. And so we really appreciate all the things that the guys and gals do who work the railroads wherever they are. It's a hard-working group of people, and we just want to thank you for everything that you do, and want to recognize on this day all of the great things that the railroads have brought to our country. So one of the things that happened after we began joining the eastern and western half of the country was growing all the railroads, and they just went everywhere. And a lot of freight service and a lot of passenger trains. You could travel anywhere that you wanted to fairly affordably because of passenger trains. But you know, you may be asking yourself, okay, I still see the freight trains. What happened to the passenger trains? Well, that's a really good question. And in short, part of the answer is that in the 1950s, this country went car crazy. I mean, cars everywhere. After World War II, they improved the interstate so you could travel places a lot easier via car. And everybody could kind of afford a car for the most part. Most families had a car. Some families had two cars. If you were going to work, you drove. If you went to grandma's house, you drove. If you were going on vacation, you drove. And so the railroads, especially the passenger service, well, they started going out of business. And so over time, the railroads started condensing. If you just ran passenger service, you probably were turning to freight. And they were merging railroads together, and thus came up with some convoluted names like BNSF and Union Pacific, the Northern, Eastern, Southern, Western Rail Service Limited, or whatever, you know, one of these crazy names. And so that's where we are today. And if you have seen that meme that goes around the internet, you will see the picture of all the rail service running through Europe today versus all the rail service running in the United States today. And it's a stark contrast. So whenever I post something on Facebook or Instagram and I talk about bringing passenger trains back, even people that aren't train nuts, they all say, yeah, why don't we do that? It was a great thing. We lost something when we lost this expansive network of passenger service here in the United States. Well, fortunately, there is more than a grassroots movement to bring that back. There are a number of organizations around the country that are communicating with their local governments, their state governments, the federal government, industry, to try to bring back passenger rail service. And of course, Amtrak is probably going to play a big part of that as well. Now, if you look at places like Florida, there's a company called Brightline, and they have been laying in brand new rail right next to the freight rail to run services from southern Florida to the middle of the state, and now they're expanding to the upper parts of the state. So they've got beautiful trains. It's affordable. They've got wonderful passenger stations that have restaurants and shops in them. That's what we kind of need to do. If you look at what they've done, it's a good map for how we need to bring passenger rail service back state by state and from coast to coast. Okay, so I'm just a guy with a YouTube channel, but I kind of have three areas that I've made points on regarding passenger trains, because you may be sitting out there going, okay, so what's the big deal about bringing passenger trains back? Allow me to expound upon that thought. One, accessibility. So one of the things Amtrak's talking about doing here in my state is extending a passenger rail service between Cleveland, Akron, Columbus, Dayton, and Cincinnati, so north and south. So if my wife and I want to go down to the state capital for a Saturday, it's a 2.5-hour drive down and a 2.5-hour drive back. Whereas if we could take an affordable passenger train, we could have a relaxing trip. We could talk, play games, read, do a little bit of work. But you know, there are people that don't have access to automobiles without the passenger train to get them there. They would have to take a car, obviously, and they don't have access to that, or they may not have the funds for the fuel to go down to Columbus and come back. So that's the accessibility of a passenger train. People can get on board, they can go to different communities, and that leads into point two, commerce. So we're going to go down to Columbus for the day. We're going to go to a museum. We're going to go to maybe a marketplace. We're going to have a late lunch, an early dinner, and we're going to be able to then come back home. And also little stops along the way. So that brings people who may not normally travel that often to a larger community. That brings people on the passenger train to that community in order to do business or spend money in your restaurant. And again, all those little places along the way, back when the railroads used to run through there were little hotels, there were restaurants, there were shops. But you know, you've kind of heard that old saying in the movies, when the railroad left, the town dried up and blew away. And that actually happened. So commerce is a big part of what the railroads left laying on the table when they stopped running passenger trains. Now, number three, if the environment is a touch point for you, well, trains have an answer to that as well. You know, yes, it's faster to fly a very long distance in an airplane, but they use a lot of fuel. And of course, we know cars use a lot of fuel. And if you've been on the highways lately, especially with all of the stuff that's being shipped around to be delivered directly to your door, Amazon and those places, there's a lot of traffic on the roads. And I would argue that in some cases, there might be a little danger to all of that. I've been out on the highways and there have been trucks all over the place. It's a little bit scary, and it's, according to several studies have been done, that's going to get worse here in the next few years. So if you took a certain number of people off of the road on a given day because they're traveling by train, well, you're saving on fuel, you're making the roads a little bit safer, and also the other thing is that, you know, there's not all the emissions that are going on from a glut of cars that are constantly on the road. A train, especially diesel locomotives today, they're kind of like a hybrid vehicle. They use a little bit of fuel to generate electricity through a generator, which drives the wheels and the motors on the train. So it is kind of like a hybrid vehicle, and you can pull a lot of people in a passenger train with a little bit of fuel. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but those are my points in favor of some of the reasons why we need to bring passenger trains back to the United States. So anyway, hey, I hope you have a great National Train Day. Again, I want to thank the folks at the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad. We love being down here. Also want to thank Bill Krause, the man, the myth, the legend, the master model maker who's behind the camera today. And Bill and I have spent many years filming industrial and commercial videos. So today we're actually out here making something for ourselves. And I'm going to leave a link to his channel below so you can check that out. And again, I'm going to leave a link to some of the different organizations around the country that are advocating for return of passenger rail service here in the United States. All right, so if you like this content, click on like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the little bell, and that'll let you know when we put more content up. So again, have a great National Train Day, and we'll catch you on the next video.